C. He has taught in middle school mathematics, high school biology and theology, and undergraduate classes in theology and philosophy. From 2016 to 2019, he has served as the headmaster at the Chastron Academy of the Holy Family in Illinois. Dr. Hill currently lives in Austin, Texas, with his wife, Charity, and their 4 children, and serves as the headmaster of the Valor North Austin, a classical charter school. So let's please welcome Dr. Connor Hill.
All right. So some of you may know, well, my voice is a little raspy today, I don't know why, but some of you may know that Amanda Foto, who was here last year, is now working with me at Valor North. So really grateful to have her, and she was excited to hear that I was going to be talking with you today. The glory of God is man fully alive, reads the popular translation of a line from St. Irenaeus. Gentlemen, what does it mean to be fully alive? Don't we all aspire to be fully alive, even if we're not perhaps amped about glorifying God, the glorifying God part? Lest anyone conclude that Irenaeus was only talking about dudes, I do want to say a word about the translation. So Irenaeus was talking about the human being generally, so the Latin word is homo, not vir, which is the word for man. However, for the sake of my talk, my proposal for you is that insofar as you gentlemen are fully alive, you will glorify God. So what does it mean to be fully alive, and how might we as men become more fully alive? These are huge questions, and I realize that in preparing this talk that there's so much more to say, and I'm barely going to hit the tip of the iceberg here. But this is a workshop on complementarity, and so a summary of my response to these questions is this: that you will become fully alive through responding to the call to love in every relationship, and in particular, your relationships with women. Whether that's the girl sitting next to you in class, your girlfriend, or the abuela who's serving you lunch in the cafeteria. You are called to love each of them distinctly, depending on the nature of that relationship. Living fully means loving fully in each of the relationships of your life. So the gospel should never be abstract. It's about living here and now. And each of us is called in the circumstances of our lives to live out the gospel. So the invitation to give this talk has prompted me to think about my own life and how I became to be the man that I am today. In one way or another, what I'm going to share with you are just insights that I've gained, things that I found helpful for living the complementarity of the sexes, which is the theme of today. So at the outset, I do want to just offer just a little bit of context. You get a sense of where I'm coming from. I'm not from UT. This is maybe I've only been here a handful of times. So while describing myself as fully alive is definitely a stretch, I'm aspiring. As was shared in my bio, I'm one of 4 boys. I spent the majority of my life in all-boys institutions. I think it's important to say that the culture at my high school was at least largely informed by a kind of toxic masculinity. Just imagine a bunch of high school boys and what they might discuss, or don't imagine it. Actually, don't. But then I entered a college seminary program and discerned a vocation to the priesthood for 2 years. So almost exclusively, I hung out with guys, and I played rugby, and when I got into the seminary program, I prayed a lot. Yet at 21 years old, I discerned that my vocation was marriage, and a mere 6 years later, managed to convince a woman to marry me. She will be here later, so I'm not lying to you. Her name is Charity, and you can judge for yourselves whether she made the right decision. I'm a father of 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy. The boy and a girl are twins. I don a suit and tie 5 days a week. I coach rugby, I bake, I wear an apron when I cook. I do what I love and I call it work. I'm a headmaster, as was shared, at a classical school here in town. It's a co-ed school. I'm the guardian of 1,000 students at my school and a leader of 100 employees, the majority of which, it is fair to say, are women. So, this talk, again, has prompted me to ask the question, to the extent that I'm living fully, how has that fullness of life been made possible? What does it mean to be fully alive, and how do we as men live that way, live fully? So one of the most important commandments for us as Christians was spoken by Jesus at the Last Supper: love one another as I have loved you. The Christian life is to be animated by the reception of the gift of God's love, which bears fruit in the love of neighbor. Unpacking the centrality of love for what we might say is a fully lived life, St. John Paul II says this in his encyclical Redemptor Hominis, one of the most marvelous quotes from John Paul II. Man cannot live without love. He remains a being that is incomprehensible for himself. His life is senseless if love is not revealed to him. If he does not encounter love, if he does not experience it and make it his own, if he does not participate intimately in it. This, as has already been said, is why Christ the Redeemer fully reveals man to himself. The man who wishes to understand himself thoroughly and not just in accordance with immediate, partial, often superficial, and even illusory standards and measures, he must, with his unrest, uncertainty, and even his weakness and sinfulness, with his life and death, draw near to Christ. He must, so to speak, enter into him with all his own self. He must appropriate and assimilate the whole reality of the incarnation and redemption in order to find himself. If this profound process takes place within him, then he bears fruit not only in adoration of God, but also of deep wonder at himself, end quote. Gentlemen, we cannot live without love. And the central proposal of my talk, as I said, is to live fully, we must love fully. And Jesus is the one who fully reveals man to himself. Love must be revealed to us. We must encounter it, experience it, in order to understand ourselves fully. We must, with all of our unrest and uncertainty, our weakness and sinfulness, draw near to Christ. John Paul II also tells us that we must make love our own and participate intimately in it. We must exercise love in the daily relationships of our lives. Again, to live fully, we must love fully. In our culture, I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of confusion about what love is. If you've ever seen that bumper sticker with the tautology, love is love, it's trading on an ambiguity that's present in our language regarding the nature of love. We know that love is a good thing, but what is it? The best definition I've heard of love comes from St. Thomas Aquinas, who says, love means consistently willing and choosing the good of another. Love means consistently willing and choosing the good of the other. As such, love is a virtue. In case you're unfamiliar with the word virtue, I'm going to offer a brief description. A virtue inclines one to act in a good manner, both externally and intentionally. It's an abiding disposition that changes who a person is and resides in a person like second nature. Virtue is acquired through repeated acts which shape one's character and develop a stable inclination to act in a particular way. In other words, virtue is not just doing the right thing, but rather virtue is the stability of character that enables one to act according to the particular virtue easily. C.S. Lewis puts it brilliantly like this: there's a difference between doing some particular just or temperate action and being a just or temperate man. Someone who is not a good tennis player may now and then make a good shot. What you mean by a good player, though, is the man whose eye and muscles and nerves have been so trained by making innumerable good shots that they can now be relied upon. They have a certain tone or quality which is there even when he is not playing. Just as the mathematician's mind has a certain habit and outlook, which is there even when he's not doing mathematics. In the same way, a man who perseveres in doing just actions gets, in the end, a certain quality of character. Now, it is that quality of character rather than particular actions which we mean when we talk about virtue, end quote. So Lewis says that this distinction is important for the following reason. We might think that provided you did the right thing, it did not matter how or why you did it, whether you did it willingly or unwillingly, sulkily or cheerfully, through fear of public opinion or for its own sake. But the truth is that right actions done for the wrong reason don't build the internal quality of character called virtue. And it is this quality of character that really matters. If the bad tennis player hits very hard, not because he sees that a very hard stroke is required, but because he has lost his temper, his stroke might possibly, by luck, help him win that particular game, but it will not help him become a reliable player, end quote. Therefore, I want to suggest that to make love our own in the sense that John Paul II says, we have to practice love day in, day out, so we become reliable lovers, and so that the virtue of love becomes an abiding quality of character. Okay, so now we have an initial sense of what virtue is, and that love is a virtue which requires practice. Love is not one-dimensional. It does not belong to simply one kind of relationship. Again, C.S. Lewis helps us understand that there are 4 loves. The first is affection, which finds clearest expression in the natural bond between a mother and child, but also applies to the familiar bonds between members of a family, schools, or other environments where different people are thrown together. The affection for the people always around us in the normal day-to-day life is the majority of the love we experience, even if we don't label it. The second kind of love is friendship, which forms the basis of shared interest. Love develops as friends pursue common goals or interests together over time. Mutual trust and admiration deepen. Friendship flourishes more, not less, as people join in a circle of friends. The third is eros, or romantic love, understood by Lewis as more than just physical sexuality, but having a spiritual and emotional dimension. Though lovers are normally face-to-face and absorbed in one another, eros is ordered toward generosity, or what we might call self-giving love. All 3 of these natural human loves are ordered toward the fourth, toward agape, toward charity or supernatural love of God and neighbor. The virtue of love is manifold and expresses itself differently depending on the relationship. Gentlemen, to become fully alive, we need to cultivate the virtue of love, which is proper to the different relationships in our lives. To live fully is to love fully in the many different relationships of our life. Now, you might be wondering, okay, this is a talk about complementarity. When am I going to get to that? Well, here we go. So through no fault of his own, Lewis's account of the 4 loves does not take into account, as far as I can tell, the complementarity of the sexes, the topic that we're exploring today. St. John Paul II speaks of man and woman as 2 different ways of being a human person. Masculinity and femininity are, quote, 2 reciprocal, completing ways of being a body, and at the same time of being human. 2 complementary dimensions of self-knowledge and self-determination, and at the same time, 2 complementary ways of being conscious of the meaning of the body, end quote. Now, I don't have time to sort of develop this at length, but it's really an invitation for you and I'm going to share a few thoughts, but an invitation for you to continue to sort of think this through as well in your own life. But Lewis's reflection has helped me consider how we might understand, in particular, affection and love of friendship when, as men, we consider our relationships with women. The suggestion here is that affection and friendship are to be given shape by the complementarity between men and women. Exercising love, the love of friendship toward a girl is not the same as exercising the love of friendship toward one of your male friends. Gentlemen, all our relationships with women should be a response to the fact that she is a woman. And we need to be intentional about not treating her as one of the guys. Dare I say it, gentlemen, she's not your bro. An awareness of the different kinds of love and the manner in which complementarity of the sexes should add another layer to the manner in which we cultivate and live out the virtue of love in our lives. However, the awareness of these different kinds of love and our lived awareness of these different kinds of loves becomes all the more challenging in our current culture because there's something akin to a gravitational force which seeks to draw us toward a narrow understanding of love simply understood as eros. Because sex sells, as they say, we are constantly bombarded by forces of advertising and fashion that seek to dominate our minds and hearts, convincing us that love is just simply eros. Therefore, these forces attempt to threaten the life-giving dynamic of complementarity between men and women. There's so much at stake here, and sort of paraphrasing a quote from John Paul II, and I couldn't find it, but it goes something like this, and John Paul II has this way of sort of casting the whole of human history into relief and placing it before us as something for which we are responsible. He says, like the whole of human history and the meaning of human life depends on who he will be for her and on who she will be for him. And so what John Paul II is saying is, at the heart of the issue of complementarity between man and woman is the issue of the meaning of the human person, the meaning of human life, and whether history goes toward the good or toward evil. So in particular, the forces in our culture can hinder us from living out our vocation as men, specifically called to bring a manly form of love into the world. In an obvious way, I expect that we're all aware of how these forces seek to corrupt our minds and hearts by depersonalizing women or reducing them to objects of lust. But perhaps we're less aware of another danger. In our striving to be Christian men, we can respond to such a reduction of love to eros through tacitly accepting the terms set by the culture. So implicitly, we can adopt a stance which in practice reduces love to eros. And here's a couple of examples that come to mind. Fearful of what we might communicate if we show kindness, or as what Lewis calls affection, toward a young lady, we might overcompensate and act toward her in such a way that we clearly communicate that. So we want to make it clear that I'm not interested in you. And so there's a kind of disinterestedness that can inform the way that we act toward young women and the women around us. Our relationships with women are stifled, and we inadvertently do not accept our responsibility to love each and every one of them if we allow this fear of communicating what the world says is love to shape the way that we act. In our attempts to avoid the cultural forces, we can fail to practice the virtue of affection. We can fail to practice charity toward all the women in our lives. A second example, we can find ourselves inadvertently reading romantic undertones into all of our relationships with women. If I do this, then she's going to think that I like her, or vice versa, right? There's a hilarious story when Mrs. Hill and I were not even dating, but one day I brought cookies. I said I'd bake. I brought cookies to graduate school, and we're all sitting around, And she says, "Who made these cookies? Who made these cookies?" I'm very proud to put my hand up. And Connor Hill, what are you doing for the rest of your life? Needless to say, that question, the meaning of that question occupied me for at least 2 or 3 weeks. What did she mean? And does she really like me? So, anyways, and there's some lovely playfulness that the previous speaker, forgive me if I lost your name, but was sharing about. The third example, accepting the reduction of love to eros can cause another type of depersonalization that removes all genuine affection from the relationship between men and women that complementarity calls for. Okay, so to conclude, to be fully alive, we must love fully. Ultimately, being fully alive means being fully Christian. It's receiving the love of Jesus, practicing that virtue of love, these different kinds of love in different relationships, and paying particular attention to this element of complementarity, this element of the relationship between a man and a woman, cultivating in a particular way a genuine affection for the women that you encounter in your life. Cultivate the love of friendship between both men and women. Spend time together in mixed company. Some of the most fully alive young men and women that I have taught over the years spent time socializing in a group of boys and girls and just hanging out together. Finally, a word about your dance tonight. I invite you to be mindful of these different forms of love. Gentlemen, exercising the virtue of love does mean bucking up the courage to ask a lady to dance. And let's liberate ourselves by setting aside the idea that dancing is something exclusively romantic. Perhaps affection, in Lewis's sense, is the kind of love that should animate your dance this evening as man and women. Once we get over the awkwardness, and there will be much of it, dancing is fun. And dancing with a partner, I feel like, is something that enables us to really understand what complementarity is. It's a lived experience of complementarity, how men relate to women, how women relate to men. And I want to suggest it's kind of a microcosm of the relationship between men and women. Mrs. Hill and I, we have a dance tonight as well for my school, so we will be out there cutting a rug. She's a much better dancer than I am, so it takes a lot of courage for me, but it's fun. So the glory of God is man fully alive, and you have an opportunity to cultivate the virtue of love through dancing this evening, through your relationships together, so that you might experience the exuberance of living fully. Thank you.
I was reminded of a quote from, I think it was Chester